The champagne glass shattered against marble, and Avery Lynn knew her peaceful weekend was over. Across the resort terrace stood Dante Moretti, the man who made her college years hell, now a mafia boss in a $1,000 suit. Her best friend's wedding had just become a battlefield. He smirked like he owned the world. She wanted to walk away, but the bride had made them both promise to behave, and Avery never broke a promise. So she stayed, even though every instinct screamed to run, because working alongside your worst enemy for 3 days, that was asking for disaster. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. The ocean looked perfect from Avery's rental car window. Endless blue-white foam curling against sand, the kind of view that belonged on a postcard. She should have been excited. Her best friend since freshman year was getting married at one of the most exclusive resorts on the California coast, and Avery had cleared her entire calendar to be here. 3 days of sun, champagne, and celebration, no work emails, no client emergencies, just her and Sophie, like old times. Except nothing about this weekend was going to be like old times. Avery parked in the resort's circular drive and stepped out into late afternoon heat. The valet moved toward her with practiced efficiency, but she barely noticed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Where are you? We're all on the terrace." She grabbed her weekend bag from the trunk and headed toward the main entrance, her heels clicking against stone. The resort sprawled across the cliffside like something out of a dream. White walls, terraced gardens, infinity pools that seemed to pour straight into the Pacific. Money had built this place. Serious money. Sophie's fiancé, Marcus Chen, came from that kind of wealth. Old family, quiet power, the type of fortune that didn't need to announce itself. Avery had met him twice and liked him immediately. He was steady, kind, completely in love with Sophie. The kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and actually listened when you talked. She made her way through the lobby, past arrangements of white orchids and guests in linen and silk, following signs toward the terrace. Her stomach felt tight. Sophie had mentioned that Marcus's best man was an old friend from boarding school, someone he trusted completely. She'd said his name once, maybe twice, but Avery hadn't been paying attention. She should have paid attention. The terrace opened before her, marble floors, wrought iron railings, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond. 20 or 30 people clustered in small groups, holding drinks, laughing. Sophie spotted her immediately and broke away from a conversation, practically running across the space. "You're here!" Sophie threw her arms around Avery's neck, smelling like jasmine and happiness. "I was starting to think you'd gotten lost. Traffic was worse than I thought." Avery hugged her back, grinning despite the knot in her chest. "You look incredible." Sophie did. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, her sundress the exact shade of coral that made her skin glow. She looked like someone who was about to marry the love of her life, which she was. "Come meet everyone," Sophie said, grabbing Avery's hand. "Marcus is over by the bar with—" The sentence died. Avery saw him before Sophie finished speaking, saw him, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Dante Moretti stood next to Marcus, a glass of scotch in one hand, his other hand tucked casually into the pocket of his tailored black pants. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie, the kind of effortless elegance that came from never having to try. His dark hair was shorter than she remembered, swept back from a face that had always been too handsome for his own good. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they looked black from a distance. He turned his head, and their eyes met. For 1 second, maybe 2, neither of them moved. The air went still. Then Dante's mouth curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "No," Avery said. The word came out flat. "Absolutely not." Sophie's hand tightened on hers. "Avery, you said Marcus's best man was named Dante. You didn't say it was Dante Moretti. I didn't think it mattered." Sophie's voice had gone careful, the way it always did when she knew she was in trouble. "That was years ago. College. Ancient history." Ancient history. Right. Avery had spent 3 years at Stanford trying to survive Dante Moretti. He'd been pre-law, she'd been business, and somehow they'd ended up in half the same classes. He was brilliant, which would have been fine if he hadn't also been arrogant, competitive, and completely convinced that the world owed him first place in everything. Every debate became a war. Every group project turned into a battle for control. He questioned her ideas in seminars, undermined her presentations, made her feel 2 inches tall with nothing but a raised eyebrow and a cutting remark. She hated him. Hated the way he made her doubt herself. Hated that he was always 3 steps ahead. Hated that he never seemed to care, like their entire rivalry was just a game to him. And now he was here, at her best friend's wedding, for 3 entire days. Marcus appeared at Dante's shoulder, smiling broadly. Avery, Sophie's told me so much about you. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, Avery managed, though her voice sounded strange in her own ears. She forced herself to smile. This was Sophie's wedding. She could be professional. She could handle 3 days. Congratulations. Thank you. Marcus glanced at Dante, his expression warm. This is my best man, Dante Moretti. Dante, this is Sophie's maid of honor, Avery Lynn. Dante extended his hand. His smile hadn't faded. Avery. She looked at his hand like it might bite her. Then, because she had no other choice, she took it. His grip was firm, warm, exactly as confident as she remembered. Dante, she said. His thumb brushed once across her knuckles before he released her. It's been a long time. Not long enough. Sophie made a small, horrified sound. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Dante's smile widened. I see you haven't changed, he said. Neither have you. Is there a problem? Marcus looked between them, confused. No problem, Avery said quickly. She could feel Sophie's panic radiating off her in waves. Dante and I went to college together. We had a few classes. It's fine. More than a few, Dante said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. If I remember correctly, we were neck and neck for valedictorian. You remember correctly. Avery's jaw hurt from smiling. You won. Congratulations on that too. Only because you got food poisoning the week of finals. I didn't have food poisoning. No? His eyes glinted with something dangerous. What was it then? Stress, she said flatly. Caused by you. Marcus cleared his throat. Sophie looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor, but Dante just laughed, a low, genuine sound that Avery felt in her spine. Well, he said, this should be an interesting weekend. It got worse. An hour later, Avery found herself trapped at a dinner table between Sophie's aunt and one of Marcus's cousins, directly across from Dante. The seating arrangement wasn't an accident. She could see Sophie's guilt written all over her face 3 seats down. The resort had set up dinner on the terrace, long tables arranged under strings of Edison bulbs that glowed warm against the deepening sky. The food was perfect. Seared scallops, heirloom tomatoes, fresh pasta that tasted like it had been made that afternoon. Avery barely tasted any of it. So Avery, Marcus's cousin, Taylor, she thought, leaned toward her with friendly curiosity. What do you do? I run a consulting firm, Avery said. We help startups with market strategy and scaling operations. She's being modest, Sophie called from down the table. Avery's company has a 93% client retention rate. She's brilliant. Avery felt her cheeks warm. Sophie's biased. Sophie's accurate, Dante said. She looked at him sharply. He was watching her over the rim of his wine glass, his expression unreadable. You were always the smartest person in the room at Stanford, he continued. I assumed you'd end up running something impressive. She didn't know what to say to that. It sounded like a compliment, but coming from Dante, compliments had always felt like traps. What about you? She asked, though she already knew. Everyone knew about Dante Moretti. His name showed up in the business section of newspapers, usually attached to words like acquisition and expansion and unprecedented influence. He'd taken over his family's operations 5 years ago and turned them into something bigger, more powerful, more untouchable. Rumor said his business wasn't entirely legal. Rumor said he had connections that went deeper than boardrooms and handshakes. Rumor said he was dangerous. Looking at him now, in his crisp white shirt and expensive watch, Avery could believe it. I manage family interests, Dante said smoothly. Import, export, real estate. We keep busy. That was one way to describe organized crime. Sounds lucrative, Avery said. It has its moments. He set down his wine glass and leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed. Though I imagine your work is more satisfying, building something from nothing, helping people achieve their dreams. Very noble. Are you mocking me? Not at all. His mouth curved. I'm impressed. Since when do you get impressed? Since you stopped being 20 years old and terrified of your own potential. The words hit like a slap. Avery felt her breath catch. Around them, conversation continued. Someone laughing, glasses clinking, the ocean murmuring against the shore. But at their table, the air had gone sharp. I was never terrified, she said quietly. No? Dante's eyes held hers. You used to second-guess every brilliant idea you had. Apologize before you spoke. Defer to people half as smart as you because you didn't want to seem aggressive. That's not... It drove me insane. His voice was still calm, almost conversational, but something underneath it had teeth. Watching you shrink yourself because you thought being softer would make people like you more. You were better than all of them. Better than me, probably, and you couldn't see it. Avery's hands fisted in her lap. You didn't act like I was better than you. You acted like I was your competition, like I was something to beat. You were my competition. He said it simply, like it was obvious. That's why it mattered. She didn't have an answer for that. Didn't trust herself to speak without her voice shaking. So she picked up her wine glass and took a long drink, letting the Chardonnay burn cool down her throat. Taylor, bless him, started talking about his recent trip to Japan, and the conversation shifted. But Avery could still feel Dante's gaze on her, heavy and considering. By the time dessert arrived, some kind of chocolate thing with gold leaf that probably cost more than her car payment, she was ready to escape. She made it through coffee, through Marcus's toast to Sophie, through another round of laughter and stories. Then she stood, excused herself with a smile, and headed for the stone steps that led down to the beach. The sand was cool under her bare feet. She'd left her heels somewhere on the terrace, too tired to care. The ocean stretched dark and infinite before her, waves rolling in steady rhythm. Above, stars were beginning to appear, pinpricks of light against deepening blue. She walked until the sounds of the party faded behind her, then stopped and let herself breathe. 3 days. She just had to survive 3 days. Running away already? Avery spun around. Dante stood a few yards behind her, hands in his pockets, his white shirt glowing pale in the dusk. Following me? She shot back. That's not creepy at all. I saw you leave. He walked closer, stopping just outside her personal space. Thought you might want company. I don't. Liar. Excuse me? You always wanted company, Dante said. You just never wanted to ask for it. Easier to pretend you liked being alone than risk someone saying no. Avery's heart was beating too fast. You don't know anything about me. I know you used to study in the library until 2 in the morning because your roommate had a boyfriend who was always over. I know you drank terrible coffee from the vending machine and highlighted everything in yellow. I know you chewed your pen cap when you were nervous and that you always sat in the back row even though you couldn't see the board. She stared at him. How do you? Because I was paying attention. His voice had gone quiet, almost rough. I was always paying attention, Avery. The ocean roared between them. Avery felt pinned in place, caught between the water and Dante's dark eyes. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. He smiled, but it wasn't the dangerous smile from earlier. This one was smaller, sadder. Because you made me furious and I couldn't figure out why. You'd walk into a room and I'd forget what I was doing. You'd argue with me and I'd want to keep fighting just to keep you talking. I told myself it was competition. Told myself I just wanted to win. And now I know better. He took one step closer, then another. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woody that probably cost a fortune. I was an arrogant kid who didn't know what to do with the fact that you scared the hell out of me. Avery's breath caught. I scared you? Terrified me. He raised one hand slow enough that she could have stepped back and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His fingers were warm against her temple. Still do, if I'm being honest. She should move, should step away, say something cutting, rebuild the walls between them. But her feet wouldn't cooperate. And when Dante's hand slid down to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone, she didn't pull away. This is a bad idea, she managed. Probably the worst I've had in years. I still don't like you. I know. His mouth was close now, so close she could feel his breath against her lips. Doesn't change anything. He kissed her. It wasn't soft, wasn't gentle or tentative or any of the things a first kiss was supposed to be. It was fierce and demanding, like an argument translated into touch. His hand tightened on her jaw, angling her head exactly where he wanted it, and Avery heard herself make a sound that should have been embarrassing, but somehow wasn't. She kissed him back just as hard, her fingers curling into the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like wine and chocolate and something darker, something that made her head spin. When his other arm came around her waist, hauling her against him, she went willingly. They broke apart, gasping. Dante's forehead dropped to hers, his eyes closed. That, he said roughly, was not part of the plan. You had a plan? I was going to be civil, professional, prove I'd grown up. He laughed, the sound breathless. That lasted all of 6 hours. Avery's hands were still fisted in his shirt. She made herself let go, step back. Her lips felt swollen. Her whole body felt electric. We can't do this, she said. I know. Sophie will kill us. This is her wedding. I know. And I still don't trust you at all. I know that too. Dante shoved both hands through his hair, looking more undone than she'd ever seen him. Doesn't make me want you any less. The honesty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made something in her chest crack open. I need to go, she said. I need to think. All right. Don't follow me. I won't. But he caught her wrist as she turned, his grip gentle. Avery, for what it's worth, I'm sorry, for college, for being a bastard, for making you feel like you had to be smaller to survive me. His thumb brushed over her pulse point. You were never small. I just didn't know how to tell you that you were the biggest thing in my world. He released her and stepped back, giving her space. Avery walked away on shaking legs, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, Dante stayed on the beach, a solitary figure against the darkening water. She didn't look back. If she did, she wasn't sure she'd be able to keep walking. Avery made it to her room and locked the door behind her, then immediately collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her lips still tingled. She could still feel the imprint of Dante's hand on her jaw, the solid weight of him against her. What the hell had she just done? Her phone buzzed. Sophie, where did you go? Are you okay? Avery typed back quickly. Fine, just tired. Long drive. I'll see you at breakfast. The response came immediately. Did something happen with Dante? I saw you two leave. Nothing happened. We just talked. Avery? I promise. Listen, everything's fine. Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. She silenced her phone and rolled onto her side, pulling a pillow against her chest. Tomorrow they had the rehearsal. Wedding party only, Sophie had said, which meant hours of being in close proximity to Dante, pretending that kiss hadn't happened. She groaned into the pillow. This was supposed to be a simple weekend. Show up, support Sophie, drink champagne, maybe flirt with a groomsman who wasn't her ex-rival turned mafia boss. Simple. Instead, she'd kissed Dante Moretti on a beach and felt the entire world tilt sideways. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, Avery dreamed of dark eyes and dangerous smiles and the feeling of falling with no idea where she'd land. See, morning came too soon. Avery woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains and the distant sound of waves. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was and why her mouth tasted like regret. Then memory crashed back. Right, the kiss. Dante. The 3 days of proximity that stretched ahead like torture. She showered, taking longer than necessary underwater, hot enough to turn her skin pink. Then she dressed in white linen pants and a sage green tank top, French braided her hair, and stared at herself in the mirror until she looked calm. Breakfast was served on the terrace again. A massive spread of fruit and pastries, omelets made to order, fresh squeezed juice in glass carafes. Most of the wedding party was already there, gathered around tables or standing in small groups. Avery spotted Sophie immediately, radiant in a yellow sundress, deep in conversation with Marcus's mother, and Dante. Because of course. He stood near the railing with Marcus and 2 other groomsmen, coffee cup in hand, looking like he'd slept perfectly well. He wore dark jeans and a gray Henley, casual and expensive, his hair still damp from a shower. He saw her the moment she stepped onto the terrace. His eyes tracked her movement as she made her way to the coffee station, but he didn't approach. Small mercies. Avery filled a mug with coffee strong enough to strip paint and added cream until it turned the color of sand. She was reaching for a croissant when Sophie materialized at her elbow. "We need to talk," Sophie hissed. "Good morning to you too." "Don't good morning me. What happened last night?" Avery bit into her croissant and chewed slowly, buying time. "I told you. Nothing. You're a terrible liar." Sophie grabbed her arm and steered her toward a quiet corner of the terrace, away from the crowd. "Marcus said Dante came back to their room looking like he'd been hit by a truck. And you disappeared for an hour, so I'll ask again, what happened?" Avery closed her eyes. "We talked, and then we..." She trailed off. "You what?" "Kissed. Maybe. A little." Sophie's shriek was barely human. Several people turned to look. Avery wanted to die. "A little?" Sophie grabbed both of Avery's shoulders. "You kissed Dante Moretti? The guy you spent 3 years hating?" "I still hate him." "Clearly not enough to keep your mouth to yourself." "It was a mistake," Avery said firmly. "Heat of the moment. Temporary insanity. It won't happen again." "Does he know that?" "I'm sure he does." But even as she said it, Avery remembered the way Dante had looked at her on the beach, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The rough honesty in his voice when he'd apologized, the careful way he'd touched her, like she might break. "This is a disaster," Sophie moaned. "You two can barely be in the same room together. How are you going to get through the rehearsal?" "Professionally," Avery said with more confidence than she felt. "We're adults. We can handle this. Right. Adults. Who make out on beaches at weddings? It was one kiss. That you initiated? That he initiated. But you kissed him back." "Sophie." "Fine. Fine." Sophie held up both hands in surrender. "I'm not judging. I'm just worried. You and Dante have history, and not the good kind. I don't want you getting hurt." Avery softened. Sophie was protective, had been since the day they met. It was one of the things Avery loved about her. "I'm not going to get hurt," she promised, "because nothing else is going to happen. Last night was a weird moment. We're both over it." Sophie looked deeply skeptical, but she let it drop. "The rehearsal starts in an hour. Please try not to murder each other before then." "I make no promises." "Okay." The rehearsal took place in the resort's clifftop garden, where the ceremony would be held the next day. White chairs were arranged in neat rows facing an arch woven with eucalyptus and white roses. The ocean provided a dramatic backdrop, endless and blue. The wedding coordinator, a woman named Melissa with a clipboard and the organizational skills of a general, herded everyone into position with brisk efficiency. Bridesmaids on one side, groomsmen on the other, Sophie at the end of the aisle with her father, Marcus waiting at the altar with Dante at his shoulder. "All right, people," Melissa called. "We're going to walk through the processional. Bridesmaids, you'll process one at a time, starting with Avery. Groomsmen, you'll be waiting at the altar. Once everyone's in position, the bride enters. Got it?" Murmurs of agreement. Avery took her place at the head of the bridesmaids, bouquet of practice flowers in hand. The music started, a string quartet playing something classical and romantic. And go! Avery walked, slowly. One step every 2 seconds, the way Melissa had demonstrated. She kept her eyes forward, focused on the arch, absolutely not looking at Dante, even though she could feel his gaze on her like a physical touch. She reached the front and stepped to the left, turning to watch the next bridesmaid begin her walk. From the corner of her eye, she saw Dante lean slightly toward Marcus, saying something that made the groom smile. The processional continued. 3 more bridesmaids, then the flower girl, Marcus's niece, all of 5 years old and completely uninterested in walking slowly. Finally, Sophie appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm, beaming. It was beautiful. Even as a rehearsal, even without Sophie in her actual dress, the moment felt charged with meaning. Avery's throat went tight, watching her best friend walk toward the man she loved. "Now," Melissa said once everyone was in position, "we'll run through the ceremony itself. This part is mostly for the officiant's benefit, but I need everyone to know where to stand and when to sit. Maid of honor and best man, you'll hold the rings. When I give the signal, you'll step forward and hand them over." They practiced. over and over, standing, sitting, stepping forward, stepping back. Melissa was relentless, correcting tiny details that no one else would ever notice. But she was good at her job, and slowly the chaos organized itself into something that resembled a real ceremony. During a break, while Melissa conferred with the officiant, Avery found herself standing near Dante. They hadn't spoken all morning, hadn't even made eye contact. "You're good at this," he said quietly. She glanced at him, surprised. "At standing in place? At being there for people, supporting them?" He was looking at Sophie, who was laughing with her bridesmaids. "She's lucky to have you." Avery didn't know what to say to that. Dante's profile was sharp against the bright sky. Strong nose, defined jaw, the kind of bone structure that belonged on Roman statues. He'd always been unfairly handsome. That hadn't changed. "Marcus is lucky to have you too," she said finally. "Maybe." His mouth quirked. "Though I'm not sure lucky is the word most people would use." What would they use? Cursed, probably. Damned. In serious trouble. He turned to look at her then, and the amusement in his eyes faded into something else, something darker and more honest. "You didn't sleep last night." It wasn't a question. Avery fought the urge to touch the shadows under her eyes. "How do you know?" "Because I didn't either." Her breath caught. Before she could respond, Melissa clapped her hand sharply. "All right, people, let's run the recessional. This time I want energy. You just got married, you're happy. Let's see some smiles." The moment broke. Dante stepped back into position beside Marcus. Avery moved to join Sophie. They practiced the recessional, couples walking back down the aisle together, upbeat music playing. Avery was paired with one of Marcus's groomsmen, a cheerful guy named David who made jokes the whole way. It was easy, comfortable. But when they reached the end and Melissa called for everyone to reset, Avery caught Dante watching her again. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were shoved deep in his pockets, tension written in every line of his body. After the rehearsal came lunch, then free time before the rehearsal dinner. Avery escaped to her room with a book she had no intention of reading and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles overhead. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We need to talk." D. Her heart kicked. She should delete it, should block the number and pretend she'd never seen it. Instead, she typed back, "Nothing to talk about. Liar. Stop calling me that. Stop lying." She threw her phone across the bed and pressed both hands to her face. This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, successful and independent, perfectly capable of handling one complicated man. So why did Dante Moretti make her feel like she was 20 years old again, completely out of her depth? Another buzz. Beach. 1 hour. "I'll bring coffee." "No, please." The please did it. Dante Moretti didn't say please, didn't ask. He demanded, took, assumed the world would bend to his will. But he was asking now. Avery grabbed her phone. "Fine. 1 hour." "And this doesn't mean anything." Of course not. She could practically hear the smile in his response. Avery changed 3 times before settling on denim shorts and a white cotton blouse. Then felt stupid for carrying what she wore to meet someone she supposedly didn't like. She braided her hair again, left it loose, braided it once more. Finally gave up and let it fall in dark waves around her shoulders. At the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes too bright. She looked nervous, excited, like a woman about to do something reckless. She grabbed her sunglasses and headed for the door before she could change her mind. The beach was quieter in the afternoon. Most of the wedding guests were napping or day drinking by the pool, recovering from the morning's rehearsal. Avery kicked off her sandals at the edge of the sand and walked barefoot toward the water, scanning the shoreline. Dante was already there. He sat on a piece of driftwood near the tide line, 2 paper coffee cups balanced on the bleached wood beside him. He'd changed too, olive green swim trunks and a white t-shirt, his feet bare, sunglasses pushed up into his hair. He stood when he saw her approaching. Didn't smile. Just watched her close the distance between them with an expression she couldn't read. "You came," he said. "You brought coffee." She picked up one of the cups and took a sip. Iced vanilla latte, extra shot, the way she'd ordered it religiously in college. "How did you remember?" "I told you, I was paying attention." Avery lowered herself onto the driftwood, leaving space between them. The ocean was calm today, barely any waves. A few surfers bobbed in the distance, waiting for swells that wouldn't come. "So," she said, "you wanted to talk." "I did." Dante sat beside her, closer than necessary, but not quite touching. "I wanted to apologize. Again. Properly this time." "You already apologized last night. That was for college. This is for the kiss." She turned to look at him. His jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "You're apologizing for kissing me?" "I'm apologizing for not asking first." He pulled off his sunglasses and met her eyes. "You said you didn't trust me. Then I kissed you without making sure you wanted it. That was wrong." Avery's chest went tight. "I kissed you back. After I'd already started. I didn't give you a choice." "Dante." She set down her coffee and twisted to face him fully. "If I hadn't wanted it, I would have stopped you. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from your impulses." "I know that. Do you? Because right now you're acting like I had no agency in what happened." She felt anger sparking, familiar and almost welcome. "I'm a grown woman. I chose to kiss you back. I chose to stay on that beach instead of walking away. Stop taking responsibility for my choices." Something shifted in his expression. "You wanted it?" "Of course I wanted it. I'm furious about it, but yes, I wanted it." "Why furious?" "Because you're Dante Moretti." She threw up her hands. "Because you spent 3 years making my life hell, and now you show up looking like that, saying things that sound almost decent, and I'm supposed to just forget? Supposed to pretend you didn't make me feel worthless?" "I never thought you were worthless." "You made me feel it anyway." Her voice cracked. She hated that. Hated giving him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under her skin. "Every time you questioned me in class. Every time you smirked like my ideas were cute but ultimately wrong. Every time you acted like I was just some obstacle in your way instead of a person." Dante's face had gone pale beneath his tan. "Avery, I'm not finished." She was standing now, her hands fisted at her sides. "You want to know why I second-guessed myself? Why I apologized before I spoke? Because you taught me that anything I said would be torn apart, that I had to be perfect or I'd be dismissed. You did that, not anyone else. You." The silence that followed felt enormous. Dante stared at her, his jaw working like he was trying to find words and failing. Finally, he stood too, his movement slow. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I was cruel. I was competitive and insecure, and I took it out on you because you were the only person who challenged me. The only person who made me work for it." He took a step closer. "I told myself it didn't matter, that you could handle it, that you were strong enough to take whatever I threw at you, but that was just me making excuses for being a coward." "Coward?" The word came out sharp with disbelief. "You were never a coward. You were fearless, ruthless." "I was terrified." His laugh was bitter. "You made me feel things I didn't know how to deal with, so I turned it into competition, turned you into an opponent because that was easier than admitting I was half in love with you and didn't know what to do about it." Avery's breath stopped. "What?" "I was in love with you at Stanford." Dante said it like a confession, like something he'd been holding on to for years, or as close to it as a 20-year-old idiot could get. "I'd see you in the library and my whole day would shift. I'd argue with you just to keep you talking to me. I memorized your schedule so I could run into you between classes." He dragged a hand through his hair. "And then I graduated and told myself I was over it. Told myself it was just competition, just rivalry. Moved on with my life. Until yesterday," Avery whispered. "Until yesterday." He stepped closer still, near enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "And the second I saw you on that terrace, I knew I'd been lying to myself. About all of it." Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Dante, I don't—" "You don't have to say anything." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that what I felt for you was never small, never simple. And if I could go back and do it differently, I would. I'd tell 20-year-old me to stop being an arrogant bastard and just ask you to coffee like a normal person." Avery's throat burned. "I would have said no. Probably, but at least then you would have known." His hand lingered against her cheek. At least then I wouldn't have spent 7 years wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to tell the truth. She should step back, should put distance between them before this went somewhere she couldn't take back. But his touch was warm and careful, and the look in his eyes was so raw it made her chest ache. This is still a bad idea, she managed. I know. We barely know each other anymore. Then let me know you now. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. Let me prove I'm not the same person I was, that I can be better. For how long? 3 days? A week? She forced herself to hold his gaze. What happens when the wedding's over and we go back to our real lives? You're in New York, I'm in San Francisco. You run a criminal empire, I run a consulting firm. We don't fit. Maybe we don't. His voice had gone rough. Or maybe we fit better than you think. Maybe the fact that we challenge each other is exactly what makes this work. Or maybe it's what tears us apart. Maybe. He leaned in until his forehead rested against hers. But I'd rather find out than spend the rest of my life wondering. Avery closed her eyes. His breath was warm against her lips, his hand steady against her face. She could feel the tension in him, the careful control. He was waiting for her decision, giving her the choice he hadn't given her last night. One chance, she heard herself say. You get one chance to prove you're different. But if you make me feel small again, if you treat me like competition instead of a person, I'm done. No second chances. Deal. The word was barely a breath. Then he kissed her. This kiss was different from the one on the beach, slower, deliberate, like he was memorizing the taste of her, the shape of her mouth against his. Avery's hands came up to grip his shoulders, steadying herself as the world tilted sideways. When they finally broke apart, Dante's eyes were dark and unfocused. We should probably head back, Avery said, though she made no move to let go of him. The rehearsal dinner starts in 2 hours. Probably. His hands settled on her waist, thumbs tracing small circles against her hip bones. Or we could stay here. And do what? This. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Avery stopped thinking about rehearsal dinners or consequences or anything that wasn't the feeling of his mouth on hers. They stayed on the beach until the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They talked about everything and nothing. His work, her company, the years between college and now. He told her about taking over his family's business, about the pressure and the violence and the impossible choices. She told him about building her firm from the ground up, about the clients who became friends, about the fear that she'd never be successful enough to prove she deserved it. You know that's insane, right? Dante said. They were lying on the sand now, side by side, his hand loosely holding hers. You've built something incredible. You don't need to prove anything, says the man who runs half of New York. I inherited half of New York. You created something from nothing. There's a difference. Avery turned her head to look at him. Do you like what you do? He was quiet for a long moment. Some days. It's what I was raised for, what my father expected. And there are parts of it, the strategy, the negotiations, building something that lasts, that I enjoy. But other parts, he trailed off. Other parts are brutal. Necessary maybe, but brutal. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. Made choices that keep me up at night. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm not a good man, Avery. I want to be clear about that. I don't believe in good men, she said. Just people trying to do better than they did yesterday. He turned his head to meet her eyes. And you think I can do better? I think you want to. That's a start. Something in his expression cracked open. He rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow, and looked down at her. You're dangerous, you know that? How so? You make me want things I gave up on years ago. Normal things. Simple things. His free hand came up to trace the line of her collarbone. You make me think maybe I could be the kind of man who deserves you. Avery's breath caught. Dante, I know. Too much, too fast. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But I've wasted enough time pretending I don't feel what I feel. I'm done with that. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the moment. She pulled it out to find 3 texts from Sophie, each more panicked than the last. Where are you? Dinner starts in 45 minutes. Avery Lynn. If you are late to my rehearsal dinner, I will murder you. We have to go, Avery said, sitting up and brushing sand from her shorts. Sophie's going to kill me. Dante checked his own phone and swore. Marcus too, come on. They ran back to the resort like teenagers, laughing and breathless. At the lobby entrance, Dante caught her hand and pulled her to a stop. Wait. He was grinning, genuinely happy in a way she'd never seen him. We should probably get our story straight. What story? About us. What we tell people. Avery's heart sank a little. Right. Because this is a secret. Not a secret. Just private. For now. He tugged her closer. Unless you want to announce it, I'm fine with that too. At Sophie's rehearsal dinner, absolutely not. She'll make it weird. Fair point. He kissed her quickly. So we're just old friends catching up. Who happened to disappear together for hours? People will assume we're fighting. They wouldn't be entirely wrong. He laughed and kissed her again, longer this time. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft. Go, get ready. I'll see you at dinner. Avery nodded and headed for her room, her pulse still racing. Inside, she leaned against the closed door and let herself smile. A real, unguarded smile that felt strange on her face. This was crazy, reckless, probably a mistake, but for the first time in years she didn't care. She showered quickly, washing the sand from her hair and skin, then stood in front of her suitcase trying to decide what to wear. The rehearsal dinner was formal. Sophie had been very clear about that, which meant a dress, which meant making an effort. She settled on a navy silk dress with a deep V-neck and a skirt that fell just above her knees. Simple, but elegant. She added heels, minimal jewelry, swept her hair into a low bun. In the mirror, she looked pulled together. Sophisticated. Like someone who definitely hadn't spent the afternoon making out with her former rival on a beach. Her phone buzzed again. Sophie. I'm sending someone to drag you out of that room if you're not down here in 5 minutes. Avery grabbed her clutch and headed for the door. The rehearsal dinner was being held in the resort's private dining room, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, crystal chandeliers, and tables set with white linens and silver. The wedding party was already gathering, drinks in hand, voices raised in laughter. Sophie spotted Avery immediately and rushed over, resplendent in a rose gold gown. Finally, where have you been? I lost track of time. Not a lie, technically. You look stunning. Don't change the subject. Sophie lowered her voice. Were you with him? Avery didn't have to ask who him was. Maybe. Avery Lynn. Sophie Chen. This is my wedding weekend and you're having a secret affair with the best man? It's not an affair, it's... Avery searched for the right word and came up empty. Complicated. Everything with you is complicated. But Sophie was smiling. Just promise me you know what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Even better? Sophie squeezed her hand. Come on, Marcus wants to make a toast before dinner. The wedding party arranged themselves around a long table near the windows. Avery found herself seated between one of the bridesmaids and Marcus's cousin, directly across from Dante. He'd changed into a charcoal suit with a black shirt, no tie, and looked unfairly good. When their eyes met, his mouth curved into a small private smile. Her stomach flipped. Marcus stood at the head of the table, champagne glass raised. I'm going to keep this short because I know everyone's hungry. But I wanted to thank all of you for being here, for supporting Sophie and me as we start this next chapter. Some of you have known me since I was a kid. He nodded toward Dante. And some of you I've only known since I met Sophie, but all of you matter to us. So thank you. For your friendship, your love, your patience with our terrible planning skills. Everyone laughed. Sophie beamed up at him. And Sophie, Marcus's voice went soft. Thank you for saying yes, for choosing me, for being the best thing that's ever happened to me. I can't wait to marry you tomorrow. Glasses clinked. Someone whistled. Sophie stood and kissed Marcus, and the room erupted in cheers. Dinner was served, course after course of perfectly prepared food that Avery barely tasted. She was too aware of Dante across from her, the way he watched her when he thought no one was looking. Under the table, his foot brushed against hers. Deliberate. When she glanced up, he was deep in conversation with the bridesmaid beside him, his expression giving nothing away. She pressed her foot against his in response. His hand tightened around his wine glass. The meal stretched on. Toasts were made, funny ones, sentimental ones, slightly drunk ones. Avery gave hers carefully, talking about Sophie's loyalty and kindness, how she'd been there through every triumph and disaster of the past decade. She didn't cry, but it was close. When she sat down, Dante's eyes were on her. He mouthed something that might have been beautiful. Her cheeks warmed. After dinner, the party moved to the terrace for drinks and dancing. A DJ had been set up near the pool, playing a mix of current hits and classic love songs. The bridesmaids pulled Sophie onto the makeshift dance floor, spinning her around while she laughed. Avery hung back, content to watch. She'd never been much of a dancer, too self-conscious, too aware of how she looked. But the music was good, and the night was warm, and she felt lighter than she had in months. "Dance with me." She turned. Dante stood beside her, one hand extended. "I don't dance." "Neither do I, so we'll be terrible together." His smile was crooked, almost shy. "Come on, no one's watching." That was a lie. Half the wedding party was watching. But Avery took his hand anyway and let him lead her onto the terrace. The song was slow, something she didn't recognize. Dante's hand settled at the small of her back, warm through the silk of her dress. Her palm rested against his shoulder. They moved in an approximation of a slow dance, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You were right," Avery said after a moment. "You're terrible at this." "So are you. You just stepped on my foot." "That was on purpose." "Liar." But he was grinning. "Having fun?" "More than I expected to." She let herself relax against him slightly. "Thank you for today. For talking to me. For being honest. Thank you for giving me a chance." His hand moved in slow circles against her back. "I meant what I said earlier. About wanting to know you. The real you, not the version from college. The real me is bossy and stubborn and drinks too much coffee." "Perfect." She laughed. "You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too, and the day after." His voice dropped, intimate even with people all around them. "As many days as you'll give me." Avery's chest tightened. She looked up at him, at the serious set of his mouth, the intensity in his eyes. "Dante?" The song ended. Someone called Dante's name, one of the groomsmen, waving him over. The moment shattered. "Duty calls," Dante murmured. He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead, too fast for anyone to really see, then released her and headed toward the group of men gathering near the bar. Avery stood on the dance floor, suddenly alone, her heart still racing. "That," Sophie said, appearing at her elbow, "looked cozy." "We were just dancing." "Right, and I'm just casually getting married tomorrow." Sophie linked their arms and steered her toward the edge of the terrace. "You like him?" "I don't know what I feel." "Yes, you do. You're just scared to admit it." Avery opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Sophie was right. She was terrified. Because liking Dante, really liking him, meant risking the careful control she'd built around her life. It meant trusting someone who'd already hurt her once. It meant opening herself up to the possibility of getting destroyed. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked quietly. "What if it does?" Sophie countered. "You can't protect yourself from everything, Avery. Sometimes you have to jump and hope someone catches you." "And if they don't?" "Then you get back up and try again." Sophie squeezed her arm. "But I've known Dante for 6 months now. Marcus trusts him completely, and I've seen the way he looks at you. That man would catch you." Avery wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this could be something real, something lasting. But her past with Dante was a weight she couldn't quite shake. The party continued around them. Music and laughter, the clink of glasses, the ocean murmuring in the background. Eventually, Sophie was pulled away to dance with Marcus, and Avery found herself alone again. She slipped away from the crowd, heading for the quieter side of the terrace where the garden began. The air was cooler here, scented with jasmine and salt. She leaned against the stone railing and looked out at the dark water. "Running away again?" She didn't turn. "Just needed air." Dante came to stand beside her, close but not touching. "Big day tomorrow." "Sophie's been planning this for a year. It better be big." "Nervous?" "About what?" "Walking down the aisle, standing up in front of everyone, making promises about forever." "Those aren't my promises to make." She glanced at him. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." He said it easily, like it was obvious. "Marcus is my oldest friend. If I mess up my best man duties, he'll never let me forget it." "You'll be fine." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one giving a speech." Avery turned to face him fully. "You're giving a speech?" "Unfortunately," he grimaced. "Marcus asked me to say a few words at the reception. Something heartfelt and meaningful. I have no idea what I'm doing. Tell a story. Something that shows why you care about them. I'm not good with sentiment. You were plenty sentimental this afternoon. His eyes met hers, dark and warm. That was different. How? That was you. He reached out and caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. You make everything different. Avery's breath caught. She should pull away, should remember that they were in public, that people could see. But his hand was warm and solid, and she didn't want to let go. We should get back, she said without moving. Probably. He tugged her closer. Or we could stay here. People will notice. Let them. Dante. He kissed her, right there on the terrace, in full view of anyone who cared to look. It was quick but deliberate, a statement. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with challenge. There, he said. Now they definitely noticed. Avery's heart was hammering. You're insane. Probably. He grinned. But you like it. She did. That was the terrifying part. She liked his recklessness, his certainty, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Behind them, someone cleared their throat. They turned to find Marcus standing a few feet away, his expression caught between amusement and concern. So, Marcus said slowly, this is happening. Apparently, Dante said, not letting go of Avery's hand. Does Sophie know? She suspects, Avery admitted. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Well, as long as you two don't kill each other before the ceremony, I don't care, but Dante? His voice took on an edge. If you hurt her, best friend or not, I'll make your life hell. Understood. And Avery, if he's an idiot, you have my permission to destroy him. She couldn't help but smile. Thanks, Marcus. He shook his head, half laughing. You two are going to give me a heart attack. Come on, Sophie wants everyone for a group photo. They followed him back to the party, still holding hands. And if people stared, if whispers followed them, Avery found she didn't care as much as she thought she would, because Dante was right. Sometimes you had to jump. And maybe, just maybe, someone would catch you. The group photo took 20 minutes to organize. Melissa, the wedding coordinator, positioned everyone on the terrace steps with military precision. Bridesmaids on one side, groomsmen on the other, Sophie and Marcus in the center. Avery ended up 3 people away from Dante, but she could feel his gaze on her the entire time. Everyone smile, the photographer called. And 3, 2, 1, the flash went off. Then again, and again. Different poses, different arrangements, candid shots of people laughing. By the time Melissa declared them finished, Avery's face hurt from smiling. The party began to wind down after that. Guests drifted away in pairs and small groups, heading back to their rooms or down to the beach for late-night walks. Sophie hugged Avery goodnight, whispering, "Be careful," in her ear before Marcus swept her away. Avery stood on the terrace watching them go, suddenly exhausted. It had been a long day. The rehearsal, the beach, the dinner, the kiss that had changed everything. Her head was spinning with it all. Walk you back? Dante appeared beside her, jacket slung over one shoulder. I can find my own room. I know you can. I'm asking anyway. She should say no. Should put some distance between them, give herself time to think. But the night was warm and she wasn't ready for it to end. Fine, she said. But just to my door. No coming in. Noted. His hand found hers as they walked through the lobby, past the night desk clerk who didn't even glance up. The hallway to Avery's room was quiet, dimly lit. Their footsteps echoed on marble tile. At her door, she turned to face him. Thank you for today. Stop thanking me. He stepped closer, crowding her gently against the door. I should be thanking you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. You don't. I know. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. But I'm going to earn it anyway. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like they had all the time in the world. Avery melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I should go, Dante said, though he made no move to step away. You should. If I don't leave now, I'm not going to leave at all. Avery's heart kicked. Part of her wanted to pull him inside, consequences be damned. But the smarter part, the part that had kept her safe for 7 years, knew better. Good night, Dante. Good night, Avery. He pressed one more kiss to her forehead, then forced himself to step back. Sleep well. She watched him walk away, his hands shoved in his pockets, before letting herself into her room. Inside, she leaned against the closed door and closed her eyes. What was she doing? This was Dante Moretti, the man who'd made her college years miserable, the man who now ran a criminal empire and probably had blood on his hands. Getting involved with him was reckless at best, dangerous at worst. But when he looked at her, she forgot all of that. Forgot the rivalry and the hurt and the 7 years of distance. All she saw was the man who'd memorized her coffee order, who'd noticed she sat in the back row, who'd admitted to being in love with her when they were 20. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dante. I'm already thinking about tomorrow. She smiled despite herself. The wedding, seeing you in that bridesmaid dress, dancing with you at the reception, stealing you away when no one's looking. Presumptuous. Hopeful. Avery bit her lip. Good night, Dante. Dream about me. Arrogant. But not wrong. She threw her phone onto the bed and headed for the shower, still smiling. Sleep came easier than she'd expected. She dreamed of dark eyes and dangerous smiles, of the ocean and the feeling of being caught before she could fall. Morning arrived too soon. Avery woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and her phone buzzing insistently. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. Hello? Get up! Sophie's voice was bright with manic energy. Wedding day. We have hair and makeup in an hour and I need you here now. Avery squinted at the clock. 7 in the morning. Sophie, the ceremony isn't until 4. I don't care. I need my maid of honor, please. The plea in her voice made Avery's chest tight. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She showered quickly, pulled on yoga pants and a tank top, and grabbed the garment bag holding her bridesmaid dress. Sophie had reserved the resort's bridal suite for getting ready. A sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows, a separate room for hair and makeup, and enough champagne to sink a ship. When Avery arrived, chaos greeted her. 3 other bridesmaids were already there, along with Sophie's mother and Marcus's sister. A makeup artist was setting up her station, while a hairstylist pinned extensions into one of the bridesmaids' hair. Sophie sat in the middle of it all in a silk robe, looking radiantly terrified. You came! She leapt up and hugged Avery hard enough to crack ribs. I was worried you'd sleep through your alarm. I would never. Avery squeezed her back. How are you feeling? Like I'm going to throw up, or pass out, or both. Sophie's smile was shaky. Is it normal to be this nervous? Completely normal. Avery steered her toward a chair and pressed a glass of orange juice into her hands. Drink this. You need to eat something before the champagne starts flowing. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Hair was curled and pinned. Makeup was applied with painstaking precision. The photographer appeared to document it all, snapping candid shots of the bridesmaids laughing, of Sophie's mother crying, of the controlled chaos that came with getting 9 women ready for a formal event. Avery sat in the makeup chair while an artist worked magic on her face. Smoky eyes, nude lips, enough highlighter to make her cheekbones look sculpted. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked polished, sophisticated, like someone who belonged in Dante Moretti's world. The thought sent a flutter through her stomach. You're thinking about him, Sophie said, appearing behind her in the mirror. She was in full hair and makeup now, waiting to put on her dress. I'm thinking about a lot of things, but mostly him. Sophie's smile was knowing. I saw you 2 last night, on the terrace. Avery's cheeks warmed. It's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. Sophie squeezed her shoulder. Just be careful, okay? I know he seems different now, but people don't change overnight. Make sure he's really in this before you give him everything. I'm not giving him everything. Avery, I've known you for 10 years. You don't do anything halfway. Sophie's voice went soft. When you fall hard. Just make sure he's going to catch you. The same words from last night. Avery met Sophie's eyes in the mirror. What if he doesn't? Then you have me. Always. They hugged, careful not to mess up their makeup. Around them, the other bridesmaids were getting into their dresses, long gowns and dusty rows that somehow looked good on everyone. Avery stepped into hers and let Sophie zip her up, the silk cool against her skin. Perfect, Sophie breathed. You look perfect. Avery turned to look at herself in the full-length mirror. The dress hugged her curves before flowing to the floor. the color making her skin glow. With her hair swept up and her makeup flawless, she looked like someone from a magazine, someone confident and untouchable. She wondered what Dante would think when he saw her. At 3 o'clock, they moved to the ceremony site. The clifftop garden had been transformed. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch dripping with flowers, rose petals scattered down the aisle. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond, blue and calm under cloudless sky. It was exactly what Sophie had dreamed of. The guests were already arriving, dressed in their finest. Avery watched from the bridal suite's window as people found their seats as the string quartet began to play. Her stomach was tight with nerves, though they had nothing to do with the ceremony. "Time to get you dressed," Sophie's mother said, and the room erupted into activity again. Sophie's dress was stunning. A fitted bodice with delicate lace sleeves, a full skirt that pooled on the floor, a train that would need 2 people to carry. It took all 4 bridesmaids to help her into it, and when they finally stepped back, more than one person was crying. Sophie looked like a princess, like a dream, like someone about to marry the love of her life. "Oh, sweetheart," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're so beautiful." Sophie was crying too, careful not to ruin her makeup. "I can't believe this is real." "It's real." Avery handed her a tissue. "And you're going to walk down that aisle and marry Marcus, and it's going to be perfect." "What if I trip?" "You won't." "What if I forget my vows?" "They're written down." "What if—" "Sophie." Avery took her hands. "You love Marcus. He loves you. Everything else is just details. Now breathe." Sophie breathed. In and out, slow and steady. When her eyes opened, the panic had faded into something else. Determination. Joy. "Okay," she said. "I'm ready." They lined up at the entrance to the garden. Bridesmaids first, then Sophie on her father's arm. Avery could hear the music change, could hear the rustle as guests stood. This was it. Melissa appeared with her clipboard. "Positions, everyone. Avery, you're first. Remember? Slow steps, big smile." Avery nodded. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She stepped forward as the music swelled, and suddenly she was walking down the aisle. The garden was packed. 200 people, maybe more, all turned to watch. But Avery only saw one. Dante stood at the altar beside Marcus, hands clasped in front of him, wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made for his body. Which it probably had been. His hair was swept back, his jaw clean-shaven, and when his eyes found hers, everything else disappeared. She forgot to count her steps, forgot to smile, forgot to breathe. All she could do was walk toward him while his gaze tracked her every movement. When she reached the front and took her place, he mouthed one word: stunning. Her cheeks heated. She forced herself to look away, to focus on the next bridesmaid making her way down the aisle. But she could feel Dante's eyes on her, steady and warm. The processional continued. One bridesmaid, then another, then the flower girl who took her job very seriously, scattering petals with intense concentration. Finally, the music changed to the bridal march, and everyone stood. Sophie appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant on her father's arm. Even from a distance, Avery could see the tears in her eyes, the trembling smile. Her best friend looked happy, so deeply, completely happy that it made Avery's throat tight. Marcus was crying too, not bothering to hide it. He stood at the altar with tears streaming down his face, watching Sophie walk toward him like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. When Sophie reached him, her father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Marcus's. They turned to face the officiant, and the ceremony began. Avery barely heard the words. She was too busy fighting back her own tears, too aware of Dante standing across from her. At one point, their eyes met, and the look on his face made her breath catch. He wasn't watching the ceremony. He was watching her. The officiant talked about love and commitment, about choosing each other every day. Sophie and Marcus exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises that were funny and heartfelt, and so perfectly them that half the guests were crying. When they exchanged rings, Avery handed over Sophie's with shaking hands. "By the power vested in me," the officiant said, smiling broadly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." Marcus pulled Sophie into his arms and kissed her while everyone cheered. The string quartet launched into something joyful, and the newly married couple ran down the aisle, laughing and waving. Avery found herself walking back down the aisle on David's arm, but her eyes kept finding Dante. He was talking to one of the groomsmen, his expression polite but distant. Then he looked up and caught her staring. His smile was slow and private, meant only for her. Her stomach flipped. The cocktail hour was held on the terrace, while the ceremony space was transformed for the reception. Avery grabbed a glass of champagne and tried to circulate, making small talk with guests she'd met only yesterday. But her attention kept drifting. Dante was across the terrace talking to an older couple. His posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. He looked every inch the powerful businessman, commanding attention without trying. When someone said something funny, he laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face. Avery wanted to go to him, wanted to stand beside him and feel his hand at her back. But they'd agreed to keep things quiet, and she wasn't about to cause a scene at Sophie's wedding. He hasn't stopped looking at you. She turned to find Marcus beside her, champagne in hand, his tie already loosened. Congratulations, Avery said. How does it feel to be married? Terrifying. Amazing. Ask me again in a year. He nodded toward Dante. He's gone on you. He's not... Avery, I've known him since we were 14. I've seen him with a lot of women. He's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you. She took a sip of champagne to buy time. It's complicated. Because of college? Because of everything. His work, my work, the fact that we barely know each other anymore. She met Marcus's eyes. He hurt me. A lot. And I don't know if I can trust that he won't do it again. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Dante's not an easy man to love. He's stubborn and controlling, and he thinks he knows best about everything. But he's also loyal and protective, and when he cares about someone, he'll burn the world down for them. He paused. I'm not saying you should trust him. That's your call. But I am saying that whatever he feels for you is real. I've never seen him like this. Before Avery could respond, Sophie appeared and dragged Marcus away for photos. Avery watched them go, her mind spinning. The reception began at sunset. The garden had been transformed with string lights and tall centerpieces, round tables covered in white linen. Avery found her seat at the head table, between one of the bridesmaids and thankfully not too close to Dante, who sat on Marcus's other side. Dinner was served, perfectly cooked salmon, roasted vegetables, risotto that melted on the tongue. Avery ate mechanically, too aware of Dante a few seats away. Every so often, she'd feel his gaze and look up to find him watching her. Then the speeches began. Sophie's father went first, telling embarrassing stories from her childhood that made everyone laugh, and Sophie buried her face in her hands. Marcus's mother followed with a heartfelt toast about finding the right person. Then it was Dante's turn. He stood slowly, champagne glass in hand, and the room went quiet. For a long moment, he just looked at Marcus and Sophie, his expression unreadable. I'm not good at speeches, he said finally. Marcus knows this. He asked me to be his best man anyway, which proves he makes questionable decisions. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Dante's mouth curved slightly. I've known Marcus for 20 years. We met at boarding school when we were both homesick and terrible at soccer. He was the first person who didn't treat me like a threat or a problem. He just treated me like a friend. Dante's voice roughened. Over the years, he's been there through every disaster, every bad decision, every moment when I thought I couldn't keep going. He's seen the worst of me and stuck around anyway. Marcus was smiling, his eyes bright. When he told me he'd met Sophie, I was skeptical. Marcus falls hard and fast. But then I met her and I understood. Sophie matches him in every way that matters. She's brilliant and kind, and she doesn't take any of his nonsense. She makes him better, happier, more himself. Dante lifted his glass. Love like that is rare. The kind that challenges you and comforts you, that pushes you to be better while accepting who you are. So my advice to both of you is simple. Don't let go of it. Fight for it. Choose each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. His eyes found Avery's across the table. Held. Because when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway, that's everything. The room erupted in applause. Sophie was crying again. Marcus pulled Dante into a hug that looked more like a wrestling match. But Avery couldn't look away from Dante, couldn't breathe around the tightness in her chest. Because that speech hadn't just been about Marcus and Sophie, it had been about them. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. First dance, cake cutting, more dancing. Avery was pulled onto the floor by various groomsmen and relatives, always smiling, always gracious. but her mind was elsewhere. Finally, blessedly, she found a moment alone. She slipped away from the crowd and headed for the quieter edge of the garden, needing air. She'd barely taken 3 steps when a hand caught her wrist. Dante pulled her into the shadows between 2 hedges, his movements quick and sure. Before she could speak, he was kissing her, desperate and demanding, like he'd been holding back all night and couldn't anymore. Avery kissed him back just as hard, her hands fisting in his jacket. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Your speech," she managed, "was true." His forehead rested against hers. Every word. "Dante, I know, wrong place, wrong time, but I've been watching you all night and I couldn't stay away anymore." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "You're so beautiful it hurts to look at you." "Stop saying things like that." "Why? It's true." "Because it makes me want things I shouldn't want." "Like what?" His voice dropped, intimate in the darkness. "Like this." She pulled him down and kissed him again, slower this time. Thorough. His hands settled on her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space between them. When they broke apart, Dante's eyes were dark and unfocused. "Come back to my room," he said roughly. Every nerve in Avery's body said yes, but the smart part of her brain, the part that had kept her safe for years, held firm. "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight is Sophie's night. I can't disappear." Frustration flickered across his face, but he nodded. "Tomorrow, then." "Maybe." "Definitely." He kissed her once more, quick and possessive. "I'll wait as long as you need, but I'm not giving up." "I noticed." He smiled against her mouth. "Good." They walked back to the reception separately, careful not to be seen together, but Avery could still feel the imprint of his hands, the taste of him on her lips. The party continued late into the night. At some point, Sophie threw her bouquet, and it landed directly in Avery's hands despite her attempts to dodge. The entire room cheered while she stood there, holding the flowers and trying not to look at Dante. When she finally made it back to her room at midnight, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, she found a note slipped under her door. "Tomorrow. The beach. Noon. Please. D." Avery held the note and smiled despite everything, despite her fears and her doubts, and the voice in her head warning her to be careful. Because maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop being careful. Maybe it was time to jump. Avery woke tangled in sheets, her bridesmaid dress in a heap on the floor where she'd left it. Sunlight poured through the curtains, warm and insistent. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and squinted at the screen. 10:30. An hour and a half until she was supposed to meet Dante. Her stomach twisted with anticipation and dread in equal measure. She showered, taking her time under the hot water, trying to calm the riot of thoughts in her head. Last night had been perfect. Sophie radiant and happy, the ceremony beautiful, the reception everything a wedding should be. And Dante pulling her into the shadows, kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. She could still feel his hands on her waist, the rough edge to his voice, when he'd asked her to come to his room. Maybe she should have said yes. Avery, dressed in cut-off shorts and a loose white tank top, braided her damp hair over one shoulder. In the mirror, she looked younger than her 29 years. Uncertain, like a woman about to make a decision that would change everything. At 11:45, she headed down to the beach. The resort was quieter this morning. Most of the wedding guests were sleeping off hangovers or packing to leave. Sophie and Marcus had left at dawn for their honeymoon in Greece, but not before Sophie had cornered Avery in the lobby and made her promise to text updates. "About what?" Avery had asked innocently. "You know exactly what. Or should I say who?" Now Avery walked barefoot across the sand, scanning the shoreline. The ocean was calm, barely any waves. A few people dotted the beach, families with small children, a couple walking hand in hand near the water. And Dante. He sat on the same piece of driftwood from 2 days ago, staring out at the horizon. He'd changed into board shorts and a faded gray t-shirt, his feet bare, hair still wet like he'd just showered. When he heard her approaching, he turned, and the smile that crossed his face was so genuine it made her chest ache. "You came," he said, standing. "You asked nicely. I can be nice when properly motivated." He caught her hand and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "How are you feeling? Last night was long." "Exhausted. Happy for Sophie." She looked up at him. "Your speech was beautiful." "I meant it." "I know." That was what scared her. The honesty in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She wasn't used to it. So what now? The wedding's over. Everyone's leaving. Not everyone. We don't have to be back until tomorrow. Dante's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Spend the day with me. Doing what? Anything. Everything. I don't care as long as I'm with you. Avery's heart kicked. She should be more guarded, should protect herself better. But standing here with the sun warm on her shoulders and Dante looking at her like that, she couldn't remember why. Okay, she said. One day. His smile was blinding. Thank you. They walked along the beach for over an hour, shoes in hand, letting the water lap at their ankles. They talked about everything, childhood memories, favorite movies, the books they'd read in college that had stayed with them. Dante told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the pressure to be perfect, to never show weakness. Avery told him about building her company from nothing, about the clients who'd believed in her when she barely believed in herself. Do you like running your own business? Dante asked. Most days, it's terrifying and exhausting, and I'm constantly worried I'm one bad quarter away from losing everything. She kicked at the water. But it's mine. I built it. No one can take that away. No one would dare. He said it with such certainty that she almost believed him. You're formidable when you want something. Is that a compliment? Always. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I admire the hell out of you, Avery. You took a risk most people wouldn't and made it work through sheer determination. That's not easy. Neither is what you do. His expression darkened slightly. What I do isn't admirable. You run a multi-million-dollar operation. You provide for your family. You've built something that lasts. Built on blood and fear and broken bones. His voice had gone flat. Don't romanticize it. What I do keeps me up at night. Avery studied his face, the tension in his jaw, the shadows in his eyes. Then why do it? Because it's what's expected. What I was raised for. He looked out at the ocean. My father built this empire, my grandfather before him. Walking away would mean abandoning everyone who depends on me, the people who work for us, their families. It's not just about me. But if you could walk away, if you had a choice. Dante was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. It's all I've ever known. Sometimes I think about what my life would look like if I'd made different choices, gone to law school like I planned, become the kind of man who solves problems with words instead of violence. He met her eyes. But then I wouldn't be here, with you, and I can't regret that. The honesty in his voice made her throat tight. She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone harder, more closed off. You hide it well, but underneath your... She searched for the right word. Human, flawed, real. Disappointed? Relieved. She smiled. Perfect people are boring. He laughed and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. They stood like that for a while, the ocean murmuring around them, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Eventually they left the beach and drove into town in Dante's rental car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Avery's annual rent. The coastal town was small and charming, full of art galleries and seafood restaurants and shops selling overpriced beach trinkets. They had lunch at a hole-in-the-wall taco place that Dante swore made the best fish tacos on the West Coast. He was right. They sat at a picnic table outside, eating with their hands, arguing good-naturedly about whether cilantro belonged in salsa. It tastes like soap, Avery insisted. Only to people with defective taste buds. I do not have defective taste buds. Evidence suggests otherwise. He grinned and stole a chip from her basket. She threw a wadded-up napkin at his head. He caught it without looking and threw it back. It felt easy, normal, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. After lunch, they wandered through town. Dante bought her an ice cream cone from a vintage shop, mint chocolate chip, her favorite. She bought him a ridiculous souvenir keychain shaped like a surfboard that said, California Dreaming, in terrible script. He attached it to his car keys immediately. You're going to regret that when you're back in New York, Avery said. I'm going to look at it and think of you. No regrets. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. They drove back to the resort in the late afternoon, the windows down, music playing low. Dante's hand rested on her thigh, warm and possessive. Avery covered it with her own, lacing their fingers together. At the resort, they parked and sat in the car for a moment, neither wanting to break the spell. "Come to my room," Dante said quietly. "Please." Avery's pulse jumped. "Dante, just to talk. I promise." His eyes were serious. "I'm not ready for today to end." She wasn't either. That was the problem. Every hour with him made her want more, made her forget all the reasons this was dangerous. "Okay," she said, "but just to talk." His room was on the top floor, a suite with a private balcony overlooking the ocean. It was immaculate, bed made with military precision, no clothes scattered around, nothing out of place. The only sign anyone was staying there was a laptop on the desk and a phone charging on the nightstand. Dante grabbed 2 bottles of water from the mini fridge and handed her one. "Balcony?" They sat in the cushioned chairs facing the water, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. The view was spectacular. Endless ocean, sky turning pink and gold, the sound of waves below. "I could get used to this," Avery said. "The view or the company?" "Both," Dante smiled. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower. Then he spoke, his voice careful. "What happens when we leave here?" Avery had been dreading this question. "I don't know. I want to see you again. In the real world, not just at weddings." "You're in New York. I'm in San Francisco. It's a 5-hour flight. I can make that work." "For how long? A week? A month?" She turned to look at him. "This weekend has been amazing, but it's not real life. Real life is work and responsibilities and the fact that we live on opposite sides of the country. So we figure it out." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for a chance. I gave you a chance. 1 weekend. I'm asking for more than that." His eyes held hers. "I'm asking you to trust me enough to try." Avery's chest felt tight. "Dante, you don't understand. I've built my entire life around being independent, not needing anyone. The idea of depending on someone, of letting them in." She shook her head. "It terrifies me." "Why?" "Because people leave. They disappoint you. They promise things they can't deliver." Her voice cracked. "My father left when I was 8, just walked out one day and never came back. My mother spent years waiting for him, convincing herself he'd return. And I watched her break herself trying to be enough for someone who didn't want to stay." Dante was very still. "I'm not your father. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But the fear is still there." She looked down at her hands. "What if I let myself fall for you and you change your mind? What if the distance is too hard or you realize I'm not worth the effort?" "Avery, look at me." She did. His expression was fierce. "I have spent 7 years trying to forget you. Tried to convince myself that what I felt in college was just competition, just ego. I dated other women, built a life, told myself I was fine." He reached over and took her hand. "But I wasn't fine. Because none of them were you. None of them challenged me or called me on my nonsense or made me want to be better. And the second I saw you again, I knew I'd been lying to myself." "That doesn't mean it will work." "No, it doesn't. But it means I'm willing to fight for it. To do the work, make the flights, have the hard conversations." His grip tightened. "I'm all in, Avery. The question is whether you're brave enough to be all in, too." She wanted to say yes, wanted to throw caution away and trust that this feeling between them was real, was lasting. But the scared part of her, the part that remembered her mother's tears, her father's absence, held her back. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to figure out if I can do this." Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "How much time?" "I don't know, not long. She stood abruptly, suddenly needing space. "I should go. It's getting late." Dante stood too. "Don't run from this." "I'm not running. I'm being smart." "You're being scared." He said it gently, without judgment. "And I get it, but running won't make the fear go away." "Maybe not, but staying might make it worse." She headed for the door, her heart hammering. At the threshold, she turned back. "Thank you. For today, for everything. I just need to think." "Avery," but she was already gone, walking quickly down the hallway before he could say anything else that would make her want to stay. Back in her room, she collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her chest felt hollow. She'd wanted to say yes, had been half a second from saying yes, but the fear had been too strong, too familiar. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sophie, already in Greece. "How's it going with you-know-who?" Avery typed back. "Complicated. Good complicated or bad complicated? Both. Want to talk about it?" Avery stared at the message for a long moment, then called. Sophie picked up on the second ring. "Okay, spill. What happened?" So Avery told her everything. The day together, the conversation on the balcony, Dante asking for a real chance and her running scared. "I'm a coward," Avery finished miserably. "You're not a coward. You're careful. There's a difference." Sophie's voice was kind. "But Avery, you can't let your father's choices dictate your life forever. At some point, you have to take a risk. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? What if you walk away from something real because you're too afraid to try?" Sophie paused. "I've seen the way he looks at you. That man is serious, and I've seen the way you look at him. You're serious too, even if you won't admit it. I barely know him. You knew him well enough in college to let him get under your skin. You know him well enough now to be terrified of how much you feel." Sophie's voice went soft. "Stop overthinking this. What does your gut say?" Avery closed her eyes. Her gut said Dante was telling the truth, that what he felt was real, that walking away from this would be the biggest mistake of her life. "My gut says I'm an idiot if I let him go," she whispered. "Then don't." Sophie said it simply, like it was obvious. "Go to him. Tell him you're scared but you're willing to try. See what happens." "What if I get hurt?" "Then you get hurt, and you survive it, like you've survived everything else. But at least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering." They talked for a few more minutes, then Avery hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding. Sophie was right. She was always right. Avery stood, ran her fingers through her hair, and headed for the door. The elevator ride to Dante's floor felt endless. Her palms were sweating. Her mouth was dry. She was about to do something terrifying and reckless and completely unlike her usual careful self. She knocked on his door before she could change her mind. It opened almost immediately. Dante stood there in the same clothes from earlier, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw her, surprise flickered across his face. "Avery, can I come in?" He stepped back without a word, letting her pass. The balcony doors were still open, the curtains moving slightly in the breeze. His laptop was open on the desk, some kind of spreadsheet visible on the screen. "I thought you needed time," Dante said carefully. "I did? I do." She turned to face him. "But I also needed to tell you something." "Okay." She took a breath. "You were right. I'm scared. I'm terrified of letting you in, of trusting that this is real. Because every instinct I have says to protect myself, to not give anyone the power to hurt me." Her voice shook. "But I'm more scared of walking away, of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try." Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went soft. "So here's what I'm offering," Avery continued. "I'll try. I'll do the long distance, take the flights, have the hard conversations. But I need you to be patient with me, because I'm going to panic sometimes. I'm going to doubt. And I need you to understand that it's not about you. It's about me learning to trust again. I can do that. And I need honesty, complete honesty. If something changes, if you start to have doubts, you tell me. You don't string me along or try to protect my feelings. You just tell me the truth." "Done." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Anything else?" "Don't make me regret this." "I won't." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "I promise you, Avery, I won't." Then he was kissing her properly, deep and thorough, and she stopped thinking about fear or doubt or anything that wasn't the feeling of his mouth on hers. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. He lifted her easily, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, letting him carry her toward the bed. "Wait," she gasped against his mouth. "Are we—" "Only if you want to." He set her down gently on the edge of the mattress, his hands framing her face. "We can wait. I can wait. Whatever you need." Avery looked up at him. at this complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly tender man who'd somehow worked his way past every defense she had, and she made her choice. "I don't want to wait," she said. The smile that crossed his face was devastating. Thank God. He kissed her again, slower this time, like they had all night. His hand slid under her tank top, warm against her skin. She arched into his touch, her breath catching. "Dante," she whispered. "I've got you," he murmured against her throat. "I've got you." And for the first time in years, Avery believed it. The next morning, Avery woke wrapped in expensive sheets with Dante's arm heavy across her waist. Sunlight streamed through the balcony doors she vaguely remembered closing at some point during the night. She could hear the ocean, the distant cry of seagulls. Dante was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen. Without the tension he usually carried, he looked younger, almost peaceful. She should probably feel awkward, should be panicking about what they'd done, what it meant. But lying here in his arms felt right in a way nothing else ever had. His eyes opened slowly. When he saw her watching, his mouth curved into a lazy smile. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Sleep okay?" Eventually, she felt her cheeks heat. "You're distracting." "Good." He traced idle patterns on her spine. "What time is it?" She reached for her phone on the nightstand. 9:30. "We should probably get up. Checkout is at 11. Or we could stay here." His hand slid lower, making her breath hitch. "Call it a late checkout." "Dante, I'm kidding. Mostly." He sat up reluctantly, the sheet pooling at his waist. "Though the idea has merit." Avery sat up too, suddenly aware that she was completely naked in broad daylight. She reached for her tank top and pulled it on, trying to look casual about it. "Don't," Dante said softly. "Don't hide from me." "I'm not hiding. I'm just—" She gestured vaguely at herself. "Not used to this." "To what?" "Morning afters. I don't usually—" She broke off, flustered. Understanding crossed his face. "How long has it been?" "Since what?" "Since you let someone stay the night." Avery's throat went tight. "A while. I don't do relationships. I don't let people get close." "Until now." "Until now," she agreed quietly. Dante reached over and took her hand. "For what it's worth, I'm honored and terrified, and completely out of my depth." "You? Out of your depth?" "Completely. I have no idea how to do this, how to be the kind of man you deserve." He met her eyes. "But I'm going to try anyway." Her chest ached. "What happens now?" "We pack up, go back to our lives, and then what?" "Then I call you, every day if you'll let me. I visit on weekends when I can. You visit me when you can. We figure it out as we go." That sounds exhausting. It probably will be. He pulled her into his lap and she went willingly. "But you're worth it. We're worth it." Avery rested her forehead against his. "I'm going to hold you to that." "Please do." They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together. Then reality intruded. Checkout time, flights to catch, the real world waiting. They showered separately, which was probably for the best given their limited time. Avery dressed in the clothes from yesterday, feeling rumpled and thoroughly disheveled. Dante threw on jeans and a black Henley, somehow looking perfect anyway. "Not fair," Avery muttered, watching him. "What? You look like you just walked out of a magazine. I look like I slept in a hedge." "You look beautiful." He crossed to her and kissed her thoroughly. "And thoroughly ravished. Which you are." She swatted his chest, but she was smiling. They packed quickly, checked out, loaded their bags into their respective rental cars. In the parking lot, surrounded by other departing guests, they stood facing each other. "Call me when you land," Dante said. "I will." "And Avery?" He caught her hand. "Don't overthink this. We're going to be fine." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the distance and the complications wouldn't destroy what they'd built this weekend, but doubt still whispered at the edges of her mind. "Okay," she said. He kissed her one last time, slow and sweet, then forced himself to step back. "I'll see you soon." "Soon," she echoed. She watched him drive away, his black Mercedes disappearing down the coastal road. Then she got in her own car and headed for the airport, her heart heavy and hopeful in equal measure. The future was uncertain, the distance was real. But for the first time in 7 years, she wasn't running from Dante Moretti. She was running toward him. And that, she thought, was everything. The flight back to San Francisco felt longer than it should have. Avery stared out the window at clouds stretched like cotton across an endless sky. Her phone clutched in her hand. Dante had texted twice already. Once when he boarded in Los Angeles, once when his plane took off for New York. "Miss you already. This is going to be harder than I thought." She'd replied both times with something light, something that didn't reveal how tight her chest felt, or how much she already wanted to hear his voice. By the time she landed at SFO, her phone had 3 more messages. Landed. JFK is a nightmare as usual. Tell me you made it back safe. Avery? She called him from the parking garage, leaning against her car. He picked up on the first ring. Thank God. I was starting to think your plane crashed. I'm fine. Just landed. She could hear noise in the background. Traffic, horns, the chaos of New York. Where are you? Heading into the city. I have a meeting in an hour that I can't miss. His voice softened. How are you? Tired, confused, missing you, which is ridiculous because I saw you 6 hours ago. Not ridiculous. I feel the same way. A pause. Can I call you tonight after my meeting? I'd like that. Good. Get home safe. I'll talk to you soon. The call ended and Avery sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine. The drive home was autopilot. Highways and familiar exits, the San Francisco skyline appearing in the distance. Her apartment felt empty when she walked in, too quiet after the noise of the resort. She unpacked mechanically, throwing her bridesmaid dress over a chair to deal with later. Her phone buzzed with work emails she'd been ignoring all weekend. Clients needing updates, her assistant asking about meetings, the endless demands of running a business. Real life, crashing back with a vengeance. Avery made herself respond to the urgent ones, then gave up and ordered takeout. While she waited for the food, she opened her laptop and stared at her calendar. Wall-to-wall meetings for the next 2 weeks. A presentation to potential investors. 3 client pitches. No room for anything else. No room for flying to New York. Her phone rang at 9:30. Dante's name lit up the screen. Hey, she said, curling up on her couch. Hey yourself. How's your night? Quiet? Yours? Long. The meeting ran late, then I had to deal with a situation that should have been handled hours ago. He sounded exhausted. I'm just getting home now. What kind of situation? He was quiet for a beat. The kind I can't really talk about. Right, because his work involved things she probably didn't want to know, things that would keep her up at night if she thought about them too hard. Okay, she said carefully. I'm sorry. I know that's not a great answer. He sighed. But I meant what I said about honesty. Some parts of my life I can't share, not because I don't trust you, but because it's safer for you not to know. Safer? People in my world use information as weapons. The less you know, the better protected you are. A chill ran through her. Dante, what exactly do you do? I know it's not legal, but let's not do this over the phone. His voice had gone careful. When you visit, we'll talk, face to face. I'll tell you everything you want to know. But not like this. Avery's stomach twisted. When I visit, you're assuming I will, aren't you? I don't know. My schedule is insane for the next few weeks, and I can't just drop everything to fly across the country. Silence stretched between them. When Dante spoke again, his voice was measured. You're pulling away. I'm being realistic. You're scared. Maybe I am. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. This weekend was a fantasy, Dante. Perfect weather, beautiful location, no responsibilities. But this is real life. I have a company to run. You have whatever dangerous thing you do. We live 3,000 miles apart. How is this supposed to work? We make it work. I fly out there, you fly here, we video call, we figure it out. For how long? Until the distance gets too hard? Until you get tired of making the effort? I'm not going to get tired. You don't know that. Her voice cracked. You can't promise that. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. You're right. I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise I won't mess up or that the distance won't be brutal. but I can promise I'm going to try. Every single day I'm going to choose you. That's all I can offer." Avery pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "What if it's not enough?" "Then at least we tried. At least we didn't give up without fighting for it." He paused. "But I think it will be enough. I think we're worth the work." She wanted to believe him, wanted to silence the doubt screaming in her head, but fear was louder. "I need to go," she said. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." "Avery." "Good night, Dante." She hung up before he could respond, then immediately felt sick about it. Her phone rang again. She didn't answer. It rang twice more before going silent. A text came through. "I'm not giving up on you, on us. Take the time you need, but know I'm here." Avery threw her phone across the couch and buried her face in her hands. The next 2 weeks were hell. Avery threw herself into work with obsessive focus, taking every meeting, staying late at the office, filling every spare moment with spreadsheets and strategy sessions. Her assistant started giving her concerned looks. Her business partner asked if she was okay. "Fine," Avery lied, just busy." The truth was she was running. From her feelings, from the decision she needed to make, from the fear that loving Dante Moretti would destroy her. He texted every day. Nothing heavy, nothing demanding, just small updates about his life, a photo of his morning coffee, a complaint about traffic, a joke that made her smile despite everything. "Thought about you today when I passed a taco place. Their fish tacos were garbage compared to ours. Marcus called to tell me Sophie loved Greece, also to yell at me for whatever I did to upset you. Want to fill me in? I miss you." She responded sporadically, keeping her messages short. She told herself she was giving them both space, time to think, but really, she was just being a coward. On a Thursday night, 3 weeks after the wedding, Sophie video called from Greece. "You look terrible," Sophie said by way of greeting. "Nice to see you too. How's the honeymoon?" "Amazing. Marcus is perfect. Greece is perfect. Stop changing the subject." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "What happened with Dante?" "Nothing happened." "Liar. He called Marcus last week asking if you were okay. Said you'd been distant." Avery's chest tightened. "We're just figuring things out." By not talking to him? By being realistic about what a relationship between us would look like. Which is what? Hard? Of course it's hard. Anything worth having is hard. Sophie leaned closer to the camera. "Avery, I love you, but you're being an idiot. That man is trying. He's showing up every day, and you're shutting him out. I'm protecting myself." "From what? From being happy? From taking a risk on someone who clearly cares about you?" Sophie's voice gentled. "Your father left. That was horrible and unfair, and it shaped who you are. But Dante isn't your father. He's not going to abandon you because things get difficult." "You don't know that." "Neither do you, but you'll never find out if you don't give him a real chance." After they hung up, Avery sat in her apartment and stared at her phone. Sophie was right. She'd been pulling away, using work and distance as excuses to avoid facing her feelings. She was terrified. But she was also miserable. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Dante. "I know you're busy. I know this is hard, but I need to see you, please. Let me fly out this weekend." Avery stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed, "Okay, Saturday." His response came immediately. "Thank you, I'll be there." Saturday morning, Avery cleaned her apartment in a panic. Dante had texted his flight information the night before, landing at SFO at 11. She'd offered to pick him up, but he'd insisted on taking a car service, said he didn't want to inconvenience her. By 10:30, she was a wreck. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on jeans and a soft blue sweater. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. In the mirror, she looked nervous and young. The buzzer rang at 11:45. Avery took a breath and pressed the intercom. "Come up." She opened her apartment door and waited, her heart hammering. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and then Dante appeared. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He hadn't bothered to shave. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, a weekend bag slung over one shoulder. When he saw her, something in his expression cracked. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Dante dropped his bag and closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry," Avery whispered against his chest. "I've been awful. You've been scared." His hand stroked her hair. I get it. I don't know how to do this, how to trust that you won't leave. I know. He pulled back enough to look at her face. But I'm here. I flew across the country to see you, and I'll do it again next week and the week after if that's what it takes to prove I'm serious. That's not sustainable. Maybe not, but until we figure out something better, it's what we've got. He cupped her face in his hands. Avery, I can't make you trust me. That's something you have to choose. But I can show up. I can be consistent. I can prove that I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes burned. What if I can't do it? What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. You're careful. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead. And I'm patient. I can wait. For how long? As long as it takes. She searched his face for any sign of dishonesty, any hint that this was an act, but all she saw was exhaustion and determination and something that looked like love. Okay, she whispered. Okay. He kissed her then, slow and thorough, and Avery felt something in her chest unclench. When they finally broke apart, Dante was smiling. Can I come in now? Or are we doing this entire conversation in your doorway? She laughed, watery but real, and pulled him inside. They spent the weekend learning each other in a new context. Dante met her for coffee at her favorite cafe, walked through her neighborhood, listened while she explained the intricacies of her business. She showed him her office, introduced him to her assistant, who gave Avery a knowing look that she pointedly ignored. On Saturday night, they cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen. Dante was surprisingly competent with a knife, chopping vegetables while she handled the pasta. They bickered good-naturedly about garlic measurements and whether red wine belonged in marinara sauce. It does, Dante insisted. It makes it too acidic. You have no appreciation for complexity. I have plenty of appreciation. I just also have taste buds. He kissed her to shut her up, and the pasta almost burned. After dinner, they curled up on her couch with wine and talked. Really talked, the way they hadn't been able to over text or brief phone calls. Dante told her about his week, the meetings, the decisions, the weight of running an organization where mistakes cost lives. Avery told him about her pitch to investors, her worry that she was taking on too much, her fear of failure. You won't fail, Dante said with absolute certainty. You don't know that. I know you. You don't know how to fail. You just keep going until you succeed. That's not true. I fail all the time. Then you get back up and try again. That's not failure. That's resilience. Avery rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. I'm glad you came. Me too. Sunday morning, Avery woke wrapped in Dante's arms in her bed. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, warm on her skin. She turned to find him already awake, watching her. How long have you been up? She asked. A while. I didn't want to move and wake you. You should have woken me. We don't have much time left before your flight. His expression darkened. Don't remind me, Aunt. They had breakfast at a diner near her apartment, terrible coffee and perfect pancakes, then walked through Golden Gate Park. The weather was cool and clear, tourists and locals mingling on the paths. Dante held her hand the entire time, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I need to tell you something, he said as they stopped near a pond. Avery's stomach dropped. Okay, I'm thinking about making some changes. To my work. He stared out at the water. I've been doing this for 5 years and it's eating me alive. The violence, the moral compromises, watching good people get hurt because of decisions I make. I can't keep doing it. What are you saying? I'm saying I want out. Not completely. I can't just walk away from my responsibilities. But I want to transition the operations to people I trust. Step back from the day-to-day. Focus on the legitimate parts of the business. He looked at her. It won't be quick. It might take a year, maybe more. But I'm going to do it. Because of me, because of you, and because of me. Because I want a life that doesn't keep me up at night. His hand tightened on hers. I want a future where I can be the kind of man you deserve, where I don't have to hide what I do or worry about your safety. Avery's throat was tight. That's a huge decision. I know, but I've been thinking about it since the wedding, since I saw what Marcus and Sophie have. Something real, something clean. I want that. He turned to face her fully. I want that with you. Dante, I love you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. I'm in love with you. Have been since college, probably. And I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring this out. But I needed you to know. You don't have to say it back. I just needed to tell you. Avery felt tears spill over. You can't just say that. Why not? It's true. Because it's terrifying. Because it makes this real. It is real. He wiped her tears with his thumb. The question is whether you're brave enough to believe it. She thought about her father leaving, about her mother's tears, about every time she'd built walls to keep herself safe. And she thought about Dante flying across the country just to see her, about the way he looked at her like she hung the moon, about his promise to change his entire life because he wanted a future with her. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. But I love you too. I think I have for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. His smile was blinding. Yeah? She laughed through her tears. You're infuriating and intense, and you make me want to throw things at your head. But I love you. He kissed her right there in the middle of Golden Gate Park, in front of tourists and joggers and anyone who cared to look. And Avery kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, the fear and the hope and the terrifying, wonderful feeling of falling. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Move to New York, he said. Avery pulled back. What? Move to New York, or I'll move here. I don't care which. But I can't do this distance anymore. I need to see you, every day, not just on weekends. Dante, I have a business here. You can run it from anywhere, or start a New York branch, or I'll commute. Whatever it takes. His eyes were fierce. I know it's a lot to ask. I know it's fast, but I'm done wasting time. I want to build a life with you. Avery's heart was racing. That's insane. Probably, but I've never been more sure of anything. She should say no. Should be practical, cautious, smart. But looking at Dante, at this man who'd flown across the country for her, who was willing to upend his entire life because he loved her, she couldn't think of a single good reason to refuse. Okay, she said. His eyes widened. Okay, I'll think about it. Seriously think about it. She took a breath. I can't just move tomorrow. I have clients, contracts, a lease. But maybe we can figure something out. A hybrid situation where I split time between cities until my business is stable enough to relocate. That works? He was grinning now, boyish and happy. That absolutely works. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. If you're getting out of the dangerous parts of your business, I need to know what that looks like. I need full transparency. Done. I'll tell you everything. And if this gets hard, when it gets hard, we talk about it. We don't run. We don't shut each other out. I can do that. He pulled her close. Anything else? Just one more thing. She looked up at him. Promise me you'll catch me. If I fall, if I trust you with everything I have, promise you'll be there. His expression went serious. I promise. Every time, Avery, I'll catch you. And standing there in the park with the sun warm on their faces and the future spreading out before them, Avery finally believed him. They spent Dante's last few hours in San Francisco planning. He'd come back in 2 weeks. She'd fly to New York the weekend after. They'd figure out the logistics of her business, look at apartments in both cities, take it one step at a time. At the airport, saying goodbye was harder than it should have been. 2 weeks, Dante said, holding her close. 2 weeks, she echoed. I can do 2 weeks. Call me when you get home. I will. He kissed her one last time, then forced himself to walk toward security. At the checkpoint, he turned back and mouthed something that looked like, I love you. Avery mouthed it back, her chest tight but full. The drive home felt different this time. Lighter. Like she was driving toward something instead of away from it. Over the next few months, they fell into a rhythm. Dante flew to San Francisco every other weekend. Avery flew to New York on the alternating weekends. They video called every night, falling asleep with their phones propped on pillows, just to feel connected. It was hard. Exhausting. There were fights about schedules and missed calls and the frustration of wanting to be together and being stuck on opposite coasts. But they worked through it. They talked instead of shutting down. They showed up for each other even when it was inconvenient. Dante started the process of transitioning his business, bringing in trusted people to handle the parts he wanted to leave behind. It was slow and complicated, but he was determined. Avery started exploring options for expanding her business to New York, talking to potential partners, testing the waters. 6 months after the wedding, Dante showed up at her apartment unannounced on a Wednesday night. "What are you doing here?" Avery asked, shocked. "You're supposed to be in New York." "I was. I got on a plane." He walked inside and set down his bag. "I have something to ask you." "Okay." Her heart was pounding. "What?" "Move in with me. Not in 2 months or 6 months. Now." He pulled a key from his pocket. "I bought a place in Tribeca. 3 bedrooms, office space for both of us, close to everything. It's ours if you want it." Avery stared at the key. "Dante, I can't just—" "Your lease is up next month. You've been talking about opening a New York office. Your biggest client just moved their headquarters to Manhattan." He stepped closer. "Every sign is pointing in this direction. The only thing holding you back is fear." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. You're terrified of taking the leap." His voice softened. "But I'm here, I'm ready, and I'm asking you to jump with me." She looked at the key in his hand, gleaming in the light. Then she looked at Dante, at this man who'd proven over and over that he wasn't going anywhere, who'd changed his entire life because he loved her. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" "Okay, I'll move to New York, with you, to our place." She took the key, feeling its weight. "But I'm keeping my San Francisco office, and I'm bringing my terrible coffee maker." "Deal." He pulled her into his arms, laughing. "You're really doing this?" "I'm really doing this." She looked up at him. "I'm choosing you, us, whatever comes next." "Thank you," he kissed her softly, "for trusting me, for taking the risk. Thank you for catching me." 2 months later, Avery stood in their Tribeca apartment surrounded by boxes and furniture that hadn't been assembled yet. The view from the windows was spectacular, the city spreading out in all directions, alive and electric. Dante came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy." "Good, because I have one more thing." She turned to find him holding a small velvet box. Her breath stopped. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Not yet. I know we need more time, but I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "It's a promise that I'm in this, that I'm going to keep showing up, keep choosing you until you're ready for the real thing." Avery's eyes burned. "Dante, you don't have to wear it. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." He took the ring out and held it up. "You're it for me, Avery Lynn. End of story." She held out her hand and he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love you," she said. "Even though you're bossy and intense, and you bought an apartment without telling me, I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and you drink terrible coffee and you're going to fill this place with more books than we have shelf space for." She laughed and kissed him, there in their new apartment, with their new life stretching out before them. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with balance and compromise and learning to build a life together. But they showed up. They tried. They chose each other, even when it was hard. And slowly, Avery learned what it meant to trust someone completely, to believe that love didn't have to end in abandonment, that the right person would catch you every single time. Years later, when people asked how they met, Dante would smile and say they'd been rivals in college. Avery would add that they'd reconnected at a wedding and fallen in love over terrible fish tacos. They'd both agree that it hadn't been easy, that long distance and fear had almost destroyed them before they really began. But they'd also agree that it had been worth it. Every difficult conversation, every cross-country flight, every moment of doubt, because they'd found something rare, the kind of love that challenged them and comforted them in equal measure, the kind of love that made them better. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not perfection, not ease, but the willingness to fight for something real, to take the leap and trust that someone would be there to catch you. Avery had spent years building walls to protect herself from getting hurt, but Dante had shown her that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tear those walls down. Let someone see you, flaws and fears and all. Take the risk of loving someone completely, even knowing they might break your heart. Because the alternative, never risking, never loving, never letting anyone close, wasn't safety. It was just another kind of prison. So she'd chosen to jump. And Dante had caught her, every single time.